to cover some affective outcomes. Affective outcomes have to deal with values, beliefs, and dispositions. When we think about things we want to assess about our students, we typically think about just their cognitive skills or their psychomotor skills, things that they understand, things that they can do. Here we're moving it to a different domain, and we probably should care about how motivated our students are, whether or not they value school, what they think about themselves, how well they can cooperate with others, what they think about their classmates, and so on. So when we think, if we want to define effective learning, right, we're talking about emotions, values, dispositions. When we think about the things that we probably are going to care about, we have this list right here. Can my students cooperate? And if they can, who's good at it, who's not, and how can I help them? What their study habits are. I was never taught how to study. I wish I would have been, right? Social skills, interests, self-regulations, and attitudes towards learning, their self, and their self as a learner. Now, if you assess these things, you can use these by creating different groups, thinking about who's going to pair well with who based on different strengths and needs. It can help you figure out what type of content or materials will be most effective for your students in terms of what do they value, what do they care about. It'll help you come up with examples and illustrations along those same lines. It'll help you design assessments that are fun, motivating, and integrated with their interests. And it will help you determine your effectiveness, because if people like the subject less after, a year with you, that's not as good as if they like it more, right? And so those are things you probably want to keep track of. When we think of what we're going to assess, Popham, and I'm not assigning this chapter to read, but you can read it if you want. He talks about 3 different areas: attitudes, interests, and values. His suggested attitudes are towards school and learning, other people, themselves, and one that he doesn't mention but I put in there are attribution styles, or how we explain our successes and failures. It's good to know whether or not I attribute my successes to myself or to luck or something else. When we think about interests, we are typically thinking about academic interests in terms of the content or their ability to read or what they think about learning and technology, and also what their personal interests are. Finally, when I think about values, I'm thinking about honesty, integrity, justice, freedom, ecology, growth, things like that. So these are my targets, things I probably should be concerned with. If I'm thinking of how I'm going to do this, then I have a couple different options. I have direct observations where I can write little anecdotal records, and I'm sure a lot of you who've worked with children have done this already. And then I also have student judgments and reports, either appraisals or evaluations about their peers, or interviews about themselves or their peers, or inventories, surveys about what their interests are. So a brief rundown of what these things are like. Observations are really just writing down what you see. Typically they focus on problems, but you should also write down some things and communicate good things about your kids to your parents as well. When you're documenting, it's important to be objective and just write the facts of what happened, because it may need to be used later on, and I'm sure you will all receive some training to this effect. When you think of the types of things that you should record or that you might be wanting to take notes on, right, that don't fall into behavior or disruptive behavior reports, you might want to take notes on who persists and who gives up, who likes to participate and who is shy, who demonstrates aggressive behavior, has a potentially short fuse, and what works to redirect. Who is good at cooperating, right? You typically think about, right, you want in a group 1 leader or 2 leaders at the most. 1 leader is the best because then things actually get done, even though they might take you in the wrong direction. You also want some people who like to actually follow, and it's important to know who falls into that category, and it'll probably change from topic to topic. You also want to know values about your students, how they treat property, how they treat others, what do they think about school in general, right? So recommendations, think about what you're going to record in advance, examine what you write for any biases or interpretations that aren't just facts. Record enough information to make it meaningful, enough context to make it meaningful, but don't put your own flavor or spin or interpretation that doesn't stick to the facts in it. Try to write down things as soon as possible, otherwise your memory will get skewed. Record events separately on different pages in case you have to share with any parent or administrator. Keep your interpretation separate from the facts and don't jump to conclusions. Again, just because somebody does action X doesn't mean they wanted to do it or did it on purpose or things like that. And remember to record negatives and positives too. Now, another form that I can use are student judgments and appraisals of others. And I can, there's some really neat software out there that can produce what's called a sociogram, and I'll show you another example of that, or I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And so I might send out a little survey to students. It'd look like this. And I might ask them some questions about who they want to sit near, who they want to work with, and who they want to play with, noting that those might be different people. Right? Jimmy might be a ball out on the playground, but man, I don't want to be his partner in class. Right? Now, what you do from these results is you find a bunch of relationships that emerge out of this data. And again, there's software that does this automatically and creates a little sociogram chart like this. Now, from this, you can see that this is a gender segregated classroom, probably, we'll say it's middle school, right? And I have all the boys on one side, all the girls on the other side, and they do that. Girls are circles, boys are triangles. Lines here represent mutual selections. So this boy and these two girls selected each other. I have a clique of girls here, another clique here. I have two girls who have no mutual selection, so they're probably on the fringe. You probably notice some of these things, but you might not know exactly what's going on. But when you ask about rejections, who you don't want to play with, or who you not want to, you can see that this girl here is very isolated and might be the subject of bullying, and you would probably, if you hadn't noticed, want to look further into something like that because something's going on there. If you look over here, you see another clique of boys. The number of selections puts you closer to the middle, so the people in the middle are the most popular kids in class. Here I have this clique. They don't like these two kids. These kids don't like this girl. This boy who's isolated doesn't like either one of these two people in this group. So again, you probably want to wonder what's going on there and make sure that you construct groups appropriately. But these types of information or types of sociograms, again, there are freebies online, and it's really great to get an idea of what's going on within your classroom that might not be visible, especially if you're in middle school where you don't see kids all day long. If it comes to self-reports then, where students aren't doing peer appraisals, you can do either interviews or surveys. Interviews, right? They're flexible, but they're time consuming. They give you a lot of really good information and they can go all over the place. But again, it just takes a lot of time. Surveys are usually a better way to go. And it gives you a lot of information that you'll probably care about, especially in terms of student interests and so on. So a couple tips, and this is where I really want you to pay attention. I want you to think about a couple things. One, if you want students to be honest, you should probably make sure that they know that it's anonymous and they can feel safe in what they say. That's not going to come back to bite them. So no names, no handwriting, need to be anonymous surveys, and so on. Now, if I'm trying to develop student profiles and know what books kids like and so on, this doesn't apply. This is more about what people think about school, what they think about the classroom, what their relationships with their peers are like, who they might like and who they might not like, and so on, kind of like what we did before, but really more about themselves. You should explain and pitch that you're going to be using the results to guide the course, so you'll get better results. In other words, you're trying to tell the kids that you're going to use this. You should use both positive and negatively worded statements, meaning that you want to say things like, I like school a lot, and also have an item that says, I don't really care for school. And the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that the kids are actually reading and not just checking all the boxes on the right side. Right? If somebody checks that they strongly agree, or that it's very true of them that they both really like and really dislike school, that is not good data. And you're looking for those contradictions. And then you should throw that data out. You should also not ask about controversial subjects like religion and politics. Bad idea, especially. You wouldn't ask that of young kids, but middle schoolers will have lots to say. This is an example of one type of survey. Now, I want to make a distinction between multi-focus inventories and single-focus inventories. Multi-focus inventories mean that they cover multiple topics. So in this case, right, there's one, in general, I like school a lot. Overall, I don't enjoy school very much. So that's a general feeling about school. Next one, I like to learn about scientific things. And if we look down a little bit further, where'd it go? I don't want to grow up to be a scientist, right? So here I like science, I don't like science. I can write good, I can't really write good. And so there's a positive or negatively worded version of each one. Note that each pair of items have to do with general school, science, writing, reading, public speaking, math, and social studies. And so I will have positive versions and negative versions, and I'm looking to make sure that people are consistent with how they answer these, right? Now I can give more options than these. I can put on a scale of 1 to 7 or 1 to 5, right? But I want to make sure that I keep it easy, and I have things like check boxes so people can be honest, right? So when you look at sample surveys, one, I want you to be able to determine, are there multiple things being assessed? 2, are they covering inappropriate topics? 3, is it anonymous or not? And 4, do they have both positively and negatively worded items? Okay, and that is about it. Now, we typically have additional discussions about your own attitudes, and I always like hearing from you about, so far in your field experiences and your student teaching, how much of this is what you really want. What parts do you like the most? What parts do you like the least? Right now, doing this online thing, the thing I like the most is interacting with, in the classroom and even during office hours. What I like the least is probably all the kind of minutiae and details and grading things when the grading is too much and I have to stick just to objectives in a very strict way. And that's basically what I'm doing completely now. So this isolation thing is taking away the thing I like the most. But it's important to figure out what you like the most and like the least. My wife loved lesson planning, loved it. One of her favorite things to do. I dislike lesson planning. I like coming up with an idea, but I hate ironing out the details. What is your essential question regarding teaching? Meaning, what are you trying to do with your career? What are you trying to contribute to society or to yourself, right? And what does that mean for how you want to design your career? Do you want to move up the ladder and become a principal someday? Do you just want to stay in your classroom? Do you want to switch grades? What do you want to do? So these are some self-assessment questions about your values, dispositions, and beliefs that I encourage you to think about. But again, we usually have a discussion in class, but it's not going to happen this semester, sadly. I always enjoy that conversation. Anyway, I will give you a sample worksheet as well to look at, and I want you to make sure that you understand what you need to do. And that's it.